The salesman snatched Steven Seagal's black card from his hand and laughed directly in his face. "Nice try, buddy. This is clearly fake. We don't waste time with scammers here." Steven stood there calmly, watching as the man examined the card with mockery in his eyes. The salesman didn't know that card was connected to a $2 billion partnership deal with the dealership's parent company. He didn't know that Steven had flown in specifically to finalize one of the largest corporate contracts in the automotive industry's history. And he definitely didn't know that the broke-looking guy standing in front of him was about to make one quiet phone call that would change everything. "You know what?" the salesman said, pulling out his lighter. "Let me save you the embarrassment of this getting declined." He flicked the lighter open. The flame touched the edge of the black card. Steven watched in silence as the plastic began to melt and curl, the edges bubbling from the heat. Other staff members gathered around, some laughing nervously, others pulling out their phones to record. The salesman dropped the ruined card onto the marble floor with a satisfied grin. "There. Now get out before I call security. This is Prestige Motors, not a costume shop." Steven didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply bent down, picked up the melted remains of the card, and slipped them into his pocket. Then he pulled out his phone. One call. That's all it took. 30 seconds later, the dealership's front doors burst open. 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside. The CEO of Quantum Auto Group rushed inside, his face pale, flanked by lawyers and executives.
"Mr. Seagal, please, we can explain."
The salesman's grin vanished. His hands started trembling. "Wait, Mr. Seagal is in? Teach Steven Seagal." Steven looked at him calmly and said just 5 words. "I was here to buy." What happened next became the most expensive mistake in that dealership's history, and the lesson learned that day. Some people will never forget it happened. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from right now? And if you've ever been judged by how you look, type humiliation below. Let's show respect to everyone who stays calm when they're disrespected. Now let me take you back to where this all began. It was a bright Saturday afternoon in Beverly Hills, California. The sun reflected off the massive glass windows of Prestige Motors dealership, one of the most exclusive luxury car showrooms on the West Coast. Inside, the showroom looked more like an art gallery than a car dealership. Italian marble floors stretched wall to wall. Crystal chandeliers hung from 20-foot ceilings. Soft classical music played in the background, and the cars, a red Ferrari F8 Tributo, $280,000, a midnight blue Lamborghini Huracan, $350, a custom Rolls Royce $650,000. Even the entry-level vehicles started at $150,000. This wasn't just any dealership. It was the flagship location of Quantum Auto Group, one of the largest luxury automotive networks in North America, with over 200 locations across the country. And today they were expecting someone very important. But it wasn't Steven Seagal. At least they didn't think it was. Daniel Frost, the head salesman, strutted across the showroom floor like he owned the place. Designer suit, polished Italian shoes, gold Rolex catching the light with every gesture. He'd just had his best month in 5 years. 4 Ferraris sold, 2 Bentleys, 1 Aston Martin. His commission? Nearly 95,000. He was untouchable, or so he thought.
"Listen up, people."
Daniel clapped his hands, gathering the sales team near the center of the showroom. A dozen staff members turned to face him. "Corporate sent a memo this morning. We've got a VP coming in today. Big investor. Huge deal on the table." He adjusted his tie in the reflection of a nearby Bentley. "So I want everyone on their A game. Look sharp. Act professional. And for God's sake," he pointed at a younger salesman, "if someone walks in here looking like they can't afford the key fob, send them to a Honda dealership down the street." A few staff members chuckled uncomfortably. One person didn't laugh. Margaret Chen, a senior sales manager who'd been with Prestige Motors for 14 years, stood near the back with her arms crossed. She'd seen Daniel's attitude before, and she'd seen it cost the dealership good customers. But Daniel was the top performer. Management loved him, so her concerns always got dismissed. "Any questions?" Daniel asked. Silence. "Good. Now get to work." The staff scattered back to their stations. Daniel walked over to the espresso machine near the lounge area, poured himself a cup, and checked his phone. That's when the front doors opened. A man stepped inside, faded blue jeans, simple black jacket, worn boots, no flashy jewelry, no entourage, no designer accessories, just a calm, quiet presence. Steven Seagal. He walked slowly through the showroom, hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the vehicles with genuine interest. He paused in front of a sleek matte black sports sedan near the back wall, a limited edition model, one of only 50 made worldwide. He stood there for a moment, admiring the craftsmanship. Daniel noticed him from across the room. His eyes narrowed. He set down his espresso and walked over, his expression already shifting into condescension. "Excuse me," Daniel called out as he approached. "Can I help you find your way out?" Steven turned slowly, his face calm and neutral. "I'm here to look at cars," he said simply. Daniel's mouth curled into a smirk. "Look at them." He glanced back at two nearby staff members who were now watching. "Sir, these aren't display models at a mall. These are actual vehicles for actual buyers." "I understand," Steven replied. "That's why I'm here." Daniel crossed his arms, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Right. And let me guess, you saw one of these online and thought you'd come take a selfie with it. Maybe post it on Instagram?" "No," Steven said calmly. "I'd like to speak with someone about purchasing a vehicle." Daniel laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, mocking laugh that echoed across the showroom. "Purchasing?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound threatening. "Buddy, do you have any idea where you are?" Steven didn't flinch. "I do. Then you know," Daniel continued, his voice rising again for the audience now gathering, "that the cheapest car on this floor costs more than most people make in 3 years." Steven met his eyes. "I'm aware." Daniel's smirk widened as he looked Steven up and down, making a show of examining his outfit. "Are you really?" He turned to address the small group of staff members now watching. "Because you look like you just walked out of a thrift store." A few nervous laughs rippled through the showroom. Steven remained completely still, his expression unchanged. "Appearances can be deceiving," he said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure they can be." Daniel's voice was thick with sarcasm. "So tell me, which one of these cars were you planning to purchase today?" Steven gestured calmly toward the matte black sedan. "That one." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "That one. The limited edition Gran Turismo. The one that costs $30 to $40 and less." "Uh-huh." Daniel nodded slowly, his grin never fading. "And how exactly were you planning to pay for that?" Steven reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a sleek black card and held it out. The card was minimalist, matte black finish, silver lettering so subtle you could barely see it, no bank logo. Just a name embossed near the bottom. Daniel's eyes locked onto it, and his grin turned predatory. "Oh, this is perfect," he said, snatching the card from Steven's hand without asking. "You actually went out and bought yourself a fake black card." He held it up to the light, turning it over dramatically for everyone to see. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel announced like a ringmaster at a circus, "we have a comedian in the building." More laughter. Louder this time. Steven didn't react. He simply stood there, hands now resting calmly at his sides. "That card is real," he said evenly. "I'd appreciate it if you'd process the transaction." "Process it?" Daniel's voice rose with theatrical disbelief. "Oh, absolutely. Let me just run this little black card through our system so we can all watch it get declined together." He walked over to the payment terminal at the nearest counter, holding the card high like a trophy. Staff members gathered closer, some grinning, others looking uncomfortable. Margaret Chen pushed through the small crowd, her expression tense. "Daniel, maybe you should just..." "Relax, Margaret." Daniel interrupted, waving her off. "I'm just giving our customer here the full Prestige Motors experience." He swiped the card with exaggerated flair. The terminal beeped. Pure Sessingue. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms folded, his eyes locked on Steven with smug satisfaction. "This is going to be good," he muttered. The screen flashed. "Card UN VRFDTTESUR. Esh." Daniel slammed his hand on the counter. "Called it? Fake card, fake confidence, fake everything?" He grabbed the card and tossed it onto the counter dismissively. "Get out of here before I call security and have you arrested for fraud." Steven stepped forward calmly and picked up the card. "That message means the card requires secondary verification for high-value transactions," he explained, his voice still measured. "It's a security protocol." "Oh, is it?" Daniel mocked, his voice dripping with condescension. "And I suppose you're secretly a billionaire, right? Let me guess, you're testing us. Some kind of undercover millionaire social experiment." The staff laughed again, though some of the laughter sounded forced now. Margaret stepped closer. "Daniel, seriously? Maybe we should..." "Maybe we should what, Margaret?" Daniel snapped. "Waste more time on some guy who walked in off the street pretending to be someone he's not." He turned back to Steven, his eyes cold. "You know what? I'm done being nice." He snatched the card out of Steven's hand again. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver lighter. "Let me save you the embarrassment," Daniel said, flicking the lighter open. Margaret's eyes went wide. "Daniel, don't." But it was too late. The flame touched the edge of the black card. The plastic began to melt immediately, curling and bubbling at the edges. A collective gasp filled the showroom. Steven watched in silence as the card warped and twisted in the heat, pieces of melted plastic dripping onto the marble floor. Daniel held it for a few more seconds, then dropped the ruined card at Steven's feet. "There," he said, brushing his hands together. "Now get out." Steven stood there for a long moment, looking down at the melted remains of the card on the pristine marble floor. The showroom had gone completely silent. No laughter now. Just uncomfortable tension hanging in the air. Steven bent down slowly, picked up the warped piece of plastic, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Then he looked up at Daniel. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even offended. It was just calm, you know. Steven said quietly, "I've been disrespected before. It happens. But usually, people have the sense to realize their mistake before it costs them everything." Daniel's smirk faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. "Is that a threat?" He scoffed. "What are you going to do, leave a bad Yelp review?" Steven didn't respond. He simply turned and began walking toward the exit.
Yeah, that's right.
Daniel called after him, his voice gaining confidence again.
Walk away!
"And don't come back unless you can afford to actually shop here." A few staff members clapped mockingly, but Margaret wasn't clapping. She was staring at Steven's face, her brow furrowed deeply, her mind racing. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite place. As Steven reached for the door handle, Margaret suddenly gasped.
Wait!
She shouted, rushing forward.
"What, please?"
Steven paused, his hand on the door. Margaret pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, scrolling frantically through her email. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, no, no, no." Daniel frowned.
Margaret, what are you? Shut up, Daniel!
Margaret snapped, her voice cracking with panic. The entire showroom froze. Margaret never raised her voice. She found what she was looking for, an email from corporate headquarters marked confidential with a red flag. Her face went completely white as she read it. "Sir," she said, her voice shaking as she addressed Steven. Are you Steven Seagal?" The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Steven turned around slowly. "Yes," he said simply. Margaret's phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the marble floor. Daniel's confident smirk vanished instantly. "What?" he said, his voice suddenly small. "What did you just say?" Margaret bent down, picked up her phone with trembling hands, and turned the screen toward the room. FROM's Robert Klein, CEO Quantum Auto Group to all Prestige Motor Staff CBJTV Visit Confidential. Steven Seagal will be visiting the Beverly Hills location today to finalize a 2000 BLM partnership agreement for executive vehicle procurement across our entire network. This is the largest contract in company history. VP treatment is mandatory. Do not let him leave unsatisfied. The email included a photo, Steven's photo, the same man standing at the door. Daniel's legs nearly gave out beneath him. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Margaret rushed toward Steven, her hands clasped together. "Mr. Seagal, I am so incredibly sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "What just happened is completely inexcusable. Please, if you'll just give me one moment, I can..." Steven raised a hand gently, stopping her. "It's all right," he said. "It's not all right, sir." Margaret insisted, tears forming in her eyes. "This is the worst thing I've ever witnessed in my 14 years here. You deserved respect from the moment you walked in, and instead, I got exactly what I needed to see." Steven interrupted calmly. He looked past Margaret, his gaze settling on Daniel, who stood frozen like a statue, his face drained of all color. "I've been in business a long time," Steven continued, his voice steady and clear, "and I've learned that how people treat you when they think you're nobody. That's who they really are." Daniel finally found his voice, though it came out as a desperate croak. "Mr. Seagal. I didn't know. I had no idea. You didn't know who I was," Steven said. "But you knew I was a person. And that should have been enough." He pulled out his phone. "I'm going to make a call now," Steven said. "And after this call, I'll decide whether this partnership moves forward." Daniel's face turned gray. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't do this. I have a family. I just bought a house. Steven's finger hovered over the screen. Then he dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then a professional voice answered on the third ring. "Steven, this is Robert Klein. I hope everything's going well at the Beverly Hills location. The team there should be taking excellent care of you." Steven's eyes swept across the showroom, landing briefly on Daniel, whose face had turned the color of ash. "Robert," Steven said calmly, "I need to ask you something." "Of course. Anything. When you built Quantum Auto Group, what values did you want it to represent?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Respect, integrity, excellence in customer service. Those are our pillars."
Why do you ask?
Steven's voice remained even, almost conversational. "Because your head salesman just told me I don't belong in your dealership. He mocked me in front of your entire staff. And then he burned my payment card with a lighter. Because he decided I didn't look wealthy enough to deserve basic human decency. Complete silence on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice tight with barely controlled fury, he did work. I came here to finalize a $2 billion partnership, Steven continued. I'm now reconsidering whether I want to do business with a company that operates this way. Steven, Robert's voice cracked slightly. Please, I'm begging you. Don't make any decisions yet. I'm 12 minutes away. Please, just give me 12 minutes. Steven glanced at Margaret, who nodded frantically, her eyes pleading. 12 minutes. Steven agreed. Thank you. Thank you. I'm leaving right now. The call ended. Steven slipped his phone back into his pocket. The showroom remained frozen in absolute silence. Daniel tried to speak, but only a strangled sound came out. Margaret immediately sprang into action, her voice sharp and commanding. Everyone back to your stations. Now. Someone get Mr. Seagal a chair and water. Move. The staff scattered like frightened birds. A young saleswoman, her name tag read, Amy Rodriguez, approached Steven nervously, carrying a bottle of water and gesturing toward the lounge area. Mr. Seagal'S, sir, she said softly. Would you like to sit down, please? Steven looked at her and offered a small, kind smile. Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. Amy's eyes widened slightly. You remember my name? I saw your name tag when I walked in, Steven said. You were the only person who smiled at me. Tears immediately welled up in Amy's eyes. I wanted to say something, she whispered, her voice trembling. When Mr. Frost was being so rude to you, I wanted to speak up, but I didn't know how. I'm so sorry. Steven placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Don't apologize. Sometimes speaking up costs more than we can afford to pay. He paused, but remembering to be kind. That costs nothing. Amy wiped her eyes quickly and nodded. Across the showroom, Daniel had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, his body visibly shaking. Margaret stood nearby, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of anger and disgust. 14 years, she muttered. 14 years I've worked here, and you just destroyed everything in 10 minutes. Daniel looked up, his eyes red. Margaret, please. You have to help me, you have to talk to him. Tell him I'm not usually like this. Tell him. Tell him what, Daniel? Margaret's voice was ice. That you only humiliate people when you think they can't hurt you? That you're only respectful when someone's important? Daniel had no answer. The minutes crawled by like hours. Staff members pretended to work, but everyone kept glancing at the entrance. At the door, waiting. At exactly 11 minutes and 40 seconds, 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the dealership. The doors flew open. Robert Klein burst through the entrance, his face flushed, his silver hair slightly disheveled, flanked by 2 lawyers in dark suits and his head of operations carrying a tablet and a briefcase. Mr. Seagal. Robert rushed forward, his hand extended. Please? I cannot apologize enough for what happened here today. Steven stood calmly and shook his hand. Robert. Tell me everything, Robert said, his voice tight. I want to hear exactly what happened. Steven recounted the events, calmly, factually, no embellishment. And with every sentence, Robert's expression grew darker. When Steven finished speaking, the showroom was so quiet you could hear the distant hum of traffic outside. Robert Klein stood motionless for a long moment, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides. Then he turned slowly toward Daniel. You burned his card, Robert said, his voice dangerously calm. Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Answer me? Robert's voice exploded through the showroom. You took a customer's payment card and burned it with a lighter. Sir, Daniel's voice cracked. I thought it was fake. I thought he was trying to scam us. I didn't know who. Why you dedina go biomas, Robert roared. The entire staff flinched. Robert took a step closer to Daniel, his voice shaking with fury. You think that's what this company stands for? Judging people by their clothes, mocking them, destroying their property. No, sir, You just what? You just decided that basic human decency was optional. Daniel's face crumpled. I made a mistake. Please, I'm begging you. A mistake. Robert's laugh was bitter. A mistake is getting someone's name wrong. A mistake is miscalculating a price. What you did was deliberate cruelty. He turned to Margaret, his expression softening slightly. Ms. Chen, how long have you been with this company? 14 years, sir, Margaret answered. And in those 14 years, have you ever treated a customer the way Mr. Frost did today? Never, sir. That's what I thought. Robert's voice became firm and clear. Effective immediately, you are the new general manager of this location. Margaret's eyes went wide. Sir, you tried to stop this, Robert continued. You recognized the problem instantly. You put the customer first. That's leadership. He turned back to Daniel, who had gone deathly pale. Daniel Frost, you are terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your address within 7 business days. Please. Daniel whispered, tears streaming down his face now. Please, Mr. Klein. I have a mortgage. My wife just had a baby. I'll do anything. You had your chance to do the right thing. Robert said coldly. You chose humiliation instead. Now you'll live with that choice. He gestured to 2 security guards who had been standing near the entrance. Escort Mr. Frost from the premises. He's no longer an employee. The guards approached. Daniel stood on shaking legs, his face a mask of devastation. As he passed Steven, he stopped. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. Steven looked at him for a long moment. I hope you learn from this, Steven said quietly. Not because you lost your job, but because you hurt someone for no reason other than you could. Daniel nodded weakly and was led away. The showroom remained silent as the doors closed behind him. Robert turned back to Steven, his expression exhausted but sincere. Mr. Seagal, I completely understand if you want to walk away from this partnership. What happened here is inexcusable, but I'm asking you. His voice softened. Please give me a chance to show you that this company can be better. Steven studied him carefully. I'll make you a deal, Steven said. Anything, name it. I want every employee in this dealership to go through mandatory respect and ethics training within the next 30 days. Done. I want Amy Rodriguez promoted to a full sales position with commission eligibility. Robert looked at Amy, who stood frozen in shock across the room. Consider it done. And I want Ms. Chen to implement a new policy. Every customer, regardless of appearance or background, receives VIP treatment from the moment they walk through that door. Absolutely. Steven paused. And one more thing.
Yes.
I want Quantum Auto Group to donate $100,000 to a homeless services charity. Because the way Daniel treated me today, that's how society treats vulnerable people every single day. Robert extended his hand without hesitation. You have my word. All of it. Steven shook his hand firmly. Then we have a deal. Relief flooded Robert's face. Thank you, Steven, truly. Steven smiled slightly. Now, about that matte black sedan I was looking at. Margaret stepped forward, a genuine smile breaking through. I'll handle that personally, Mr. Seagal. 3 hours later, Steven sat in the dealership's private lounge, signing the final documents for both his vehicle purchase and the $2 billion partnership agreement. Margaret had personally handled every detail, registration, insurance, customization options, with meticulous care and genuine respect. Amy brought him fresh coffee, still processing everything that had happened. Mr. Seagal, she said softly, setting the cup down. Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Why did you stay so calm? If someone treated me like that, I would have lost it. I would have been furious. Steven set down his pen and looked at her thoughtfully. Anger gives power to the person who wronged you, he said. Staying calm keeps that power with you. Amy nodded slowly, absorbing the words. And besides, Steven continued with a slight smile, getting angry wouldn't have changed Daniel. It would have just made me like him. That's really wise, Amy said.
Amy?
Yes, sir. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small for being kind. Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Tears welled up in her eyes again. Thank you. That means everything to me. Steven stood shaking her hand warmly. Congratulations on your promotion. You earned it. As he prepared to leave, the entire staff lined up near the entrance without being asked. One by one, they approached him. Not because he was famous, not because he was wealthy, but because he'd reminded them what dignity looks like. Margaret walked him to his new car, the matte black sedan, now registered in his name. Mr. Seagal, she said, I want you to know, this location will never operate the way it did this morning. You have my word. I believe you, Margaret. That's why I stayed. As Steven opened the driver's door, Robert approached one final time. Steven, he said quietly, thank you for giving us a second chance. Steven paused, one hand on the door. I didn't give you a second chance, Robert, he said. I gave you the opportunity to become who you already claimed to be. He slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, and Steven Seagal drove away, leaving behind a dealership and a group of people, forever changed. So what did we learn today? Respect isn't earned through designer clothes, expensive watches, or luxury cars. Respect is given because you're a decent human being. Daniel Frost lost everything that day. Not because Steven was famous, not because he was wealthy, but because Daniel chose cruelty when kindness cost him nothing. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. This happens every single day. People get judged, dismissed, humiliated, just because someone decided they didn't look important enough. But the person you underestimate today might be the person you desperately need tomorrow. The nobody you ignore might be the decision maker who determines your future. The stranger you mock might be someone who could change your life, for better or worse. Steven Seagal didn't walk into that dealership to prove anything. He had nothing to prove. But when disrespected, he chose grace over revenge. He chose teaching over punishing. He chose to give second chances to those who deserved them, and consequences to those who'd earned them. That's real power. Not the kind that shouts, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that simply is. The next time you meet someone, anyone, remember this story. Treat them like they matter. Because they do. You never know who's watching. You never know whose life you're affecting. And you never know when your choices will come back to you. Now I want to hear from you. Type RESPT in the comments if this story touched you. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single comment and I want to know where you are in the world.